Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to City Club Missoula's October Forum. Here come the judges, Missoula Municipal Court Judicial candidates. My name is Brett Rosenberg, and I have the privilege of serving as chair of the City Club Missoula's Board of Directors, and I am very, very happy to see so many people showing up virtually with us today. City Club's mission, as you know, is to bring people together to inform and inspire on issues vital to the community through public forums that encourage the discussion of new ideas and the free exchange of thought. We have a deep commitment to the civility and civil discourse, even when we discuss controversial issues. Before I introduce our moderator, some thank yous are in order. Thank you so much to the University of Montana and Alex Karklin in particular for making these virtual forums happen. Also, thanks to Missoula Community Access Television, which records our forums as part of their media assistance grants to nonprofit organizations. MCAT serves our community on cable channels 189 and 190. You can also find videos of past CCM forums by clicking the video button on our website, cityclubmissoula.com. Thanks to our sponsors, in particular those at the executive level. In addition to the university, they are Blackfoot Communications and the First Security Bank. We also like to highlight some other sponsors every month. So today we want to recognize Montana Public Radio and Clearwater Credit Union. We're grateful to our very diverse sponsorship, and we invite you to join them by going to our website, as I said, cityclubmissoula.com. And of course, thanks to our board of directors and our administrator, Eric Legvold. City Club Missoula would also like to acknowledge that we are in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people, some of whom are present with us today at this forum. Today, we honor the path they have always shown us in caring for this place for the generations to come. Angela Marshall will be our moderator today. Angela began her television journalism career working at KPAX TV in Missoula, where she served as the anchor and producer of Montana This Morning, the morning show for the CBS affiliate. 6 years later, she became the anchor and producer of KAJ TV's 5:30 and 10 p.m. newscasts for Kalispel. Angela is thrilled to continue being the evening anchor at ABC Fox Montana, delivering news to viewers in the western half of the state for the past 9 years. She's also the researcher, writer, and producer of a true crime podcast called Montana Murder Mysteries. A native of Seeley Lake and a graduate of Big Sky High School and the University of Montana's journalism program, Angela received numerous anchoring and reporting recognitions, including the first ever E.B. Craney Podcast of the Year Award from the Montana Broadcasters Association in 2021, an E.B. Craney Radio Program of the Year Award in 2020, Broadcaster of the Year Award in 2016, a Hearst Journalism Award for a story she wrote about the struggles of one Montana woman faced after undergoing a life-saving surgery for breast cancer, and numerous Society of Professional Journalists honors. It's a lot of awards, Angela. Angela will introduce our candidates, and I will see you all at the break around 12:15, at which point we will open the forum to questions from the audience. Over to you, Angela. Thank you so much.
Brett, thank you so much for that very warm introduction, and thank you to City Club Missoula for inviting me to moderate this forum. This really is an historic election, not only for the city of Missoula, but really for the state of Montana due to a change in state law. Missoula Municipal Court Judge Kathleen Jenks is retiring, creating one vacancy in Department 1. And formerly, Judge Jenks could appoint 2 part-time assistant judges, and now those 2 positions in Departments 2 and 3 have been elevated to full-time with the new law signed by Governor Greg Gianforte, requiring the election of all municipal court judges. And that brings us to today's City Club Missoula Forum, where members of the public are given the opportunity to ask candidates questions in a place that they might not normally get to ask these questions. Here come the judges, and here are the candidates for the 3 districts. We're going to go ahead and begin with District 1, Jennifer Streano. Jennifer Streano graduated from law school at the University of Montana and was admitted to the Montana State Bar in 2005. While in law school, she worked at the Missoula Humane Society, where she cleaned kennels and took care of the cats and dogs until they were ready for adoption. Jennifer then moved to Helena to work as a public defender for Lewis and Clark County for over a decade, where she worked in several capacities, including as the managing attorney and as part of the Major Crimes Unit. In 2016, Jennifer became the regional deputy public defender in Missoula, and in that capacity, she supervised over 20 attorneys, multiple administrative assistants, investigators, and case managers. And she was responsible for running the day-to-day operations of the office, and collaborating with other criminal justice partners, including prosecutors, law enforcement officials, and judges, to find common ground on many criminal justice issues. Jennifer left the Public Defender's Office in March of 2021 and has been in private practice since that time. So welcome to Jennifer. Sam Warren is our next candidate for Department 1, and following a stint in the U.S. Coast Guard, Sam Warren graduated from the University of Montana Law School in 1982, after which he was appointed to serve as a law clerk for the Montana Supreme Court for a one-year term. Sam then served as deputy city attorney from 1983 to 1989 and was primarily responsible for the prosecution of cases in the Missoula Municipal Court system. Following his first stint with the Missoula Municipal Court from 1989 until 2013, Sam entered private legal practice in Missoula. His practice focused on litigation and business law, and he appeared in state, federal, and bankruptcy courts. Starting in 1990, Sam would occasionally serve as substitute judge in Missoula Municipal Court in the absence of the municipal court judge. Since 2013, he has served as an assistant judge to Missoula Municipal Court Judge Kathleen Jenks. And we're going to go ahead and move on now to District 2. I apologize for my video. Apparently, it's wanting to adjust the lighting to accompany low lighting, and it has a tendency to turn a little red, so I apologize for that right now. But moving on to District 2, Eli Parker. Eli Parker was born and raised in Helena, Montana. He attended Cornell College in Iowa and law school in Missoula. As a public defender, he represented Missoulians for 15 years. Eli started out in Missoula's municipal court in 2006, where he represented people charged with misdemeanor crimes. He later represented people charged with felonies in district court and misdemeanors in justice court. Eli also wrote briefs for clients who wanted to appeal their cases to the Montana Supreme Court. Over the past 10 years, Eli has focused on representing Missoulians in mental health commitments and adult guardianships. In recognition of his advocacy and leadership, the Montana State Bar awarded Eli the George L. Bulzelman Professionalism Award in 2019. Now Eli is a candidate for Missoula Municipal Court Judge in Department 2. Thorin Gelst. For 13 years, Thorin Gelst has served the people of the state of Montana as a prosecutor, civil litigator, and as a substitute judge and justice of the peace. He has served on the Montana Supreme Court Technology Committee as a special assistant United States attorney and is regularly called upon to serve as a special prosecutor on felony cases across Montana. After working as a private attorney, Gelst transitioned into the role of deputy county attorney in Ravalli County from 2012 to 2020, where he prosecuted felony crimes for the state of Montana. In 2019, he added working as the special assistant U.S. attorney for the District of Montana to his resume, where he is responsible for prosecuting drug crimes and weapons cases. Gelst then jumped into the role of substitute justice of the peace for the Missoula County Justice Court, where he has been working since March of 2020. We're going to go ahead and move on now to District 3, and our first candidate is Jacob Coolidge. Originally from Gillette, Wyoming, Jacob Coolidge earned a bachelor's degree from St. Mary's College of Maryland in sociology. He later moved to Missoula in January of 2010 to pursue a master's degree in sociology and criminology from the University of Montana. Later, as a law student at UM, Jacob served on the board of directors for the ACLU of Montana, interned with the organization for 2 summers as well. Jacob's first job after law school was project manager and research fellow for the Montana Justice Initiative, an interdisciplinary criminal justice reform initiative. In addition to running the project and doing independent research, he taught criminology and sociology courses at the University of Montana and spoke to a variety of audiences through the Humanities Montana program. Since 2017, Jacob has worked for the Office of the State Public Defender in Missoula, and he represents low-income members of our community where they are charged with a criminal offense. He worked a myriad of cases, ranging from driving on suspended license to homicide, and worked in multiple courts across the state. And our final candidate for today, Ethan Lerman. Ethan Lerman became an attorney to help people and has used this principle to guide his 17 years of legal practice in our great state. Ethan started out as an attorney with the Montana Legal Services Association, providing civil legal assistance to those who could not otherwise afford a lawyer. And he represented people on matters involving divorce, parenting, and housing issues, with a special emphasis on victims of domestic violence. Ethan went on to work as a public defender for the state of Montana, providing representation to people accused of criminal violations of the law who could not afford legal counsel. Since 2010, he has operated his own law firm, providing representation in civil, criminal, and administrative matters to the residents of Missoula and throughout the state. Ethan holds a BA in government and minor in Spanish from Hamilton College in Clinton, New York, and a JD from Tulane University Law School in New Orleans, Louisiana. He has served the Missoula community as municipal court judge since 2019. So a warm welcome goes out to all of our candidates for Missoula Municipal Judge. And I'm going to go ahead and open up the question and answer period for all of the candidates. I'll ask all of the candidates the same question. And the first question is, what do you think of the growing jail detention center population? And in what ways will you work to reduce jail overcrowding? And we'll go ahead and have Jennifer begin the start of our question and answers.
Great. Thank you. First, I just want to say thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate this opportunity. So I think that's a great question. I think our jail overcrowding is an issue here in Missoula. One area where I think is a very important area especially for municipal court candidates to focus on are traffic offenses. I don't think that jail is an appropriate response to deal with people who are convicted of committing traffic offenses. A lot of these people are just simply unable to afford the regulatory requirements that we ask of our drivers. And so I think it also doesn't solve the problem. If somebody is unable to afford something like car insurance, sending them to jail for 10 days, which costs taxpayers $143 a day, doesn't inspire that person to get car insurance or help them in any way. And it really just only costs us more money in the long run. What I would like to do specifically is to create a traffic court for this municipal court. And what I would do is taking these traffic offenses and moving them out of the criminal arena. Montana is really only one of 12 states that actually criminalize our traffic offenses. Other states, mostly other states, view them only as civil infractions. And so I think this would be a great place to start to help the overcrowding of jail. And really at this traffic court, what we're going to be focusing on is really what are the barriers that are affecting people from getting their licenses or driving privileges restored. And that's what we're going to help them do.
Jennifer, thank you. We're going to go ahead and move on now to Sam. Sam, are you there?
Sam, you're muted.
Thank you. I hope I can be heard now, but I will just follow up on what Jennifer said. I don't have any disagreement with most of that. However, just keep in mind there is a mandatory jail sentence imposed for several traffic offenses. For example, I think a DUI, a first offense, even there's a mandatory 24 hours. For driving while suspended or revoked, there's for a second or subsequent conviction, there could be a mandatory 2 days. So there are mandatory jail times built into that. So let me just to kind of explain what we've done with that is instead of just sentencing someone to serve 2 days in jail for the first offense of driving while suspended, we do have what they call a work release program. If they sign up for it, they can do community service. Well, not community service, but actually the work release program for 1 day in lieu of the 2 days in jail. And we do have that program started to just kind of ease up on the jail sentences on traffic programs. But, I'll say something else as to driving without proof of insurance. When you hit there's no jail time provided in that statute, as I recall, until you get to a third offense. And then it's not a mandatory jail sentence. So currently, if it's not a mandatory sentence, there's very few people that go to jail on traffic offenses beyond what the mandatory is, except in some extreme cases. And some of those extreme cases can involve the insurance. I mean, it's you have some heartbreaking conversations with people that are in uninsured accidents and in an accident with an uninsured driver, and they may not have even anything beyond liability. So there is a reason for the penalties, but I am in total agreement that very rarely should anyone go to jail for a traffic offense beyond what may be a mandatory minimum. We are a municipal court. We're not the Supreme Court. We're not the legislature. We can't really rewrite the penalties on them. And that would be what my comment on it.
We're going to go ahead and move on to Department 2, Eli Parker.
Hey, thank you. And thanks to the City Club. So I think probably the greatest common factor among folks that are in jail right now, besides being poor, because unless you've been sentenced there, you probably haven't been able to make bond. You're stuck as a matter of poverty. But I think the most common factor, and this goes from the jail population to our homeless population, folks in Missoula that are experiencing homelessness, is mental illness. And I think that what we can start to do at the municipal court level is what we've been doing at the district court level. For the last 10 years of my 15 years as a public defender, I've been representing people on involuntary commitments. And these are matters in front of district court judges that are kept private because they involve psychiatric crisis, when somebody is a risk to themselves or someone else are not able to meet basic needs. And our caseload has continued to climb up every year because Missoula has more resources than anywhere else in the state, and the state hospital discharges people here because it gives them their best chance to make it. Well, what we did to try to address that is we created a position called a community coordinator, and I worked alongside the police, the state hospital, the district court, the county attorney's office, and several nonprofit mental health organizations to create this position. And what it is it's somebody that meets with people, figures out what their issue is, and helps connect them with the resources that are in Missoula. This has helped to start to cut down those cases. We can do the same thing at the municipal court level. We can start integrating social work, connecting people that are suffering from mental illness and addiction and issues involving poverty and homelessness to the resources that we have here in Missoula, because this is the kind of town that we live in. And that's what I think we're offering. That's what I want to offer. I want to use the relationships that I've built over 10 years to help connect people to the needed resources that they require to stop getting thrown into jail over and over again and be stuck on this revolving door between the community and our detention center.
Eli, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and move on to Thorin Gelst.
Thank you, Angela, and to the City Club. Is jail overcrowding an issue in Montana and Missoula specifically? Absolutely. Over the last 10 years, violent crimes increased, property crime rates have effectively stayed the same, and drug crimes have skyrocketed. The simple fact is there's more cases moving through the criminal justice system before, and there's only so many ways that we can resolve those cases as they move through. As a result, jail populations have increased. The available resources that we have, including alternatives to jail, just haven't kept up. I disagree that traffic offenses make up a large component of that. I do agree with Mr. Parker that additional resources to be used for mental health type treatment is well needed and could be very well used. As a judicial candidate, we're prohibited by the rules of judicial conduct from making commitments about how we will sentence. What I can say is that every case that comes before me will be heard on its merits. As a judge, I'll follow the law and exercise my independent discretion accordingly. Bail will be set where it's necessary to ensure that the community is protected and to ensure that defendants return to court when they are required to do so. And are there times when defendants deserve a second and third chance? Absolutely. But if jail time is warranted, it will be imposed, especially in the case of violent offenses, and even in non-violent offenses where every other alternative has been exhausted. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thorin. We're going to go ahead and move on to Department 3, Jacob Coolidge.
Yes, thank you, Angela, and thank you again, City Club, for having us. This is a great opportunity to speak with folks. I think it's noteworthy, I guess, to start with the jail issue is to focus on the fact that municipal court deals with misdemeanors that occur in city limits. So on the broader spectrum of criminality, they really are the less serious offenses. And having practiced in that court for a couple of years, I can say that the vast majority of those offenses are non-DUI traffic offenses and crimes that are typically associated with poverty, homelessness, and mental illness. The jail overcrowding has become a major problem. And I think that municipal court is only a small piece of that problem, but I believe that the way municipal court has been operating has been making that problem worse. That's what we have heard from community leaders who are responsible for running the jail. In particular, I believe that municipal court has used kind of a hammer to address crimes that can't be addressed through punishment and that actually need more innovative needs. I think the result has been a municipal court that contributes to overcrowding at the jail and causes logistical challenges at the jail when they're trying to house actual violent offenders. That can also happen in the way of pretrial bonds that only have a prejudicial effect of incarcerating people who are unable to post a relatively token amount of bond. So it leads to a system where we largely incarcerate folks because of their social circumstance, which costs the taxpayers a ton of money and only increases their likelihood of recidivism in the future. Because short-term jail sentences can destabilize folks and take away the things they have going for them, ironically increasing their likelihood to recidivate. That obviously also contributes to the jail overcrowding problem. What I would like to do from the bench is incorporate more programs that reintegrate folks into services. I think that can be done at a virtually no cost to the taxpayers by utilizing practicum students from the university who function much like Eli is talking about as case managers who help folks reintegrate into the services they're already seeking rather than use jail as a way to kind of sweep the problems under the rug.
Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and move on to our final candidate for Department 3, Ethan Lerman.
Thank you, Angela, and thanks to the City Club for having us. So what I do as a judge in municipal court is not send people to jail on traffic offenses. We suspend fines. We give them incentives to get insurance. So for example, if someone were fined $300 or $500, they would get credit, 100% credit against those fines for their insurance premium. I specifically ask them how much they paid for insurance, how long they have insurance for, and I give them credit against their fines for that insurance. Second, in terms of the jail population, the municipal court on average deals with 10,000 cases a year. 30% of those cases are traffic offenses. Currently, we have 12 people at the latest numbers, 12 people in the jail out of 190 or so on municipal court. 4 of those people are on municipal court sentences. Exactly 1 of those is a traffic offense. A third offense, DUI. There's nobody in jail on any other traffic offenses as we sit here and talk today. Lastly, with the point of legislative intent and legislative authority, the legislature makes the law. We don't make the law as judges, we follow the law. So you can't create a traffic court without legislative authority. You can't get rid of mandatory minimum sentences without legislative authority. As judges, we're bound by the law. We're not bound by a philosophy. We're a court of lowest jurisdiction. We follow the law as set forth in precedent and set forth by the Montana legislature.
Thank you to all of the candidates for answering our first question. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and give all of you an opportunity for about 2 to 3 minutes to just provide our audience a little bit about yourself and your candidacy. And we'll go ahead and begin with Jennifer Streano.
Thank you. Again, so just a little bit about myself then. I graduated law school here in Missoula in 2005 and I began working in the public defender's office in Helena. After a few years there, I joined a unit called the Major Crimes Unit, which there were just 5 attorneys selected throughout the entire state to work on this unit. What we did was we traveled all over the state handling really high complex cases, felony cases. I did that for over 5 years. And then I transitioned back to Missoula, where I became the regional deputy supervisor of Region 2, which was Missoula County, Mineral County, and Ravalli County. I was the direct supervisor of over 20 attorneys, but also other key employees in the agency, case managers we brought into that office. We also had investigators and other administrative assistants that I was also their direct supervisor for. And so I did that for over 5 years, and then just recently went into private practice. So what I guess I bring to this candidacy is I have a lot of trial experience, courtroom experience. I understand the rules of evidence. I understand courtroom procedures and what we should be bringing in the court and how people should be acting in the courtroom. I also bring managerial experience, running an office and knowing how to keep the roles of everybody's all the employees, and how we can fit together to make the most efficient court run possible. That's what needs to happen as well. And so I think those are my 2 strengths that I bring. Just a little bit of why I'm running is because I really believe that this court needs significant change. And I think the philosophy of the court needs to change. And I think it is a way of how we want to treat people in this community. This court can be a resource for the people of Missoula. It doesn't have to be a place where we just process people on a day-to-day basis. The people working in this court now, their biggest success is how much money that they have collected from the people who appear in this court. And I don't think that's how we should measure success. I think we need to measure success by how can we help people? How can we get people back on their feet? This is people, again, these are misdemeanors. These are not the high crime that we hear in district court or things like that. I want to make this a court where we are talking with other community justice leaders in this area. I want to have a relationship with the jail. I want to have a working relationship with the sheriff's office, the police department, and all of our other nonprofits that are working so hard to help our vulnerable population, the homeless, people who are suffering mental illness and substance abuse. I want to have a relationship with them. Municipal court can be part of the solution, and we can be a resource for the community. And I know along with myself and along with Jake Coolidge and Eli Parker, we can bring that to Missoula.
Jennifer, thank you so much. We'll go ahead and move on to Sam.
Sam, you're muted.
Sam, are you there? If you could unmute your mic.
There we go. Hope that worked. I just wanted to address one thing. The suggestion that there is someone at municipal court that is like somehow taking pride in the amount of fines collected is just not true. They may keep track of the number, but it's not like anybody gets a percentage of that money. So that's not part of what we do or how we identify ourselves in any way there. And again, I think I'll just kind of echo what some of the other candidates have said. Sometimes you have like essentially a script written where there is a mandatory jail sentence. And you'll hear people say, well, we use jail too much, but sometimes there is no options. And in terms of bond, the considerations we have for bond are several, but in municipal court, the general consideration is we just don't have room in the jail half the time. So a lot of times we don't set bond just because we don't want to keep somebody in jail. There's just so many beds there, and the job that part of this job that some people don't understand is constantly struggling with that, reviewing the jail lists every day to see who's in there from municipal court and how we might get them out. And I would totally welcome and embrace some of the other candidates' suggestions about other forms of social services coordinating with the court. I think that would be excellent. All this in scope of just, again, having been in that job for several years, keep in mind what the volume is. When I think Ethan mentioned 10,000 cases a year, that works out to pretty busy days. So just be aware of that. And it's not like anybody's conspiring there to collect more fines or put people in jail. That's nonsense. That's not what happens. If anything, we do a lot to look for keeping people out of jail. In addition to the work release program that I mentioned earlier, we've also stopped in some cases, especially traffic or non-jailable offenses, when a defendant misses a court date. The primary effort used to be to issue an arrest warrant, and then we've redesigned that to issue what we call an appearance warrant, so that the person, if he is found with that warrant, the officer won't take him to the jail. If it's during business hours, he takes him to the court directly there. If he encounters the defendant after business hours, he gives them a copy of the appearance warrant and tells them to appear in court within a day, one business day. So rest assured, constant efforts are being made just among the court judges themselves, as well as the jail staff, to reduce the jail population. And I think we've done a pretty commendable job of that over the last couple of years. And I think we probably send less people to jail than a lot of other courts with similar volumes. And thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and move on to Department 2, Eli Parker.
Thank you. So like I said, I've been here in Missoula for 15 years. I was raised in Helena, and I came to Missoula and went to law school. I started out with an old public defender in private practice. And then from there, I moved into the public defender's office. One thing I took from that time, though, with Mark McClaverty was that he said, take care of your relationships with people. That's your best resource. And I started working in the municipal court when I started with the public defender's office. And at that time, the judge was Judge Loudon, and we had a different kind of court back then, I believe, which was what we would call a people's court. It's a place where people knew the judge and the judge knew them. And I think that they felt held accountable, but also respected. And it was a place that I think folks went and they got a fair hearing. Maybe it wasn't the result they wanted, but they got heard. And that's what I think a municipal court should be. It should be a public resource where people can go to have conflicts resolved, where they get a chance to be understood and they get a just result. And that's what I want to provide. And so for the last period of 15 years, I started out in the municipal court, and I go to work every day and I hear the stories coming back from attorneys that are practicing in front of the current court. And I respectfully disagree with some of the characterizations that we're hearing from the current judges that are sitting on the bench there. I agree. One thing that brings, I think, Jake and Jen and I together is a shared perception of what's not working at the municipal court level, and individual ideas about how those problems can be fixed. If you look just across the street at the Justice Court, when you appear in front of the Justice of the Peace, there is a lot of time given to each case where they try to figure out if there's some other way to try to keep people out of jail. I think it's close to what Sam's describing. And that's what I think ought to be happening at the municipal court. And one thing that I think that we bring is we bring a willingness to work with the rest of the community that has been absent, to work with the district court, to work with the crime victim advocate to work with the jail staff and the sheriff's department and the police department. And if you check out the jail diversion program that our sheriff describes in his editorial recently, the big impediment to that being implemented, according to the sheriff, was the municipal court. So what we're going to do is we're going to work with people in a way that hasn't been in place for quite a while. And that's what we think is going to bring back a people's court that fits the community values of Missoula. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thorin Gelst.
So a little bit about myself. I've been in Missoula for over 15 years. I graduated from the University of Montana School of Law in 2007. Prior to that, I obtained dual degrees in criminal justice and psychology from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, where I grew up. Initially, when I started out as an attorney, I was working in civil litigation. I did appellate work for a small firm here in Missoula. And I was pretty fortunate in that I was able to practice in a wide array of practice areas and in front of judges all over Western Montana. And in 2012, I was ready for a change. I entered government service, became a deputy county attorney down in Ravalli, living in Missoula, but commuting down there every day. For 8 years, my role was to prosecute major crimes. So felony cases, drug crimes, property crimes, and violent crimes predominantly. And I was pretty successful in that role, not only at trial, of which there were many, but also in other aspects of the position. For example, I created a fully funded drug diversion program to get drug offenders out of the system and into treatment early. Usually, statistics show that if you get them into treatment early, you can help them the most and help them stay out of custody. Ultimately, that became what is the drug treatment court in Ravalli now. So it's entirely possible to develop those types of programs. In 2020, I returned to private practice. Been working for Cotner Law and now Cotner Ryan, Missoula. I continue to work as a civil litigator. Although predominantly what I do now is special prosecute. So I go around helping smaller counties prosecute bigger crimes. Well familiar with the issues that are inherent to the criminal justice system. I've also somewhat of an entrepreneur. I, in 2016, founded a small tech company. It's based out of Missoula. We design software for law enforcement to use. It helps them obtain search warrants more efficiently. That software is now being used by law enforcement agencies all over the state, and it's been given to every judge and every prosecutor in the state free of charge. What that does is it puts law enforcement back out onto the street. It gets them out from behind a desk doing warrants, and it's saved the taxpayers of Montana, on average, $500,000 a year. In terms of my vision for the court, historically, Missoula has had one full-time judge and two part-time judges with an amazing caseload. They have managed to get through it in no small part because of the amazing court staff and clerks that they have. And recently, because of the legislative change, Missoula City Council very smartly recognized that they needed to have a third judge. And I think that's going to do the most good in terms of how to deal with some of these issues. Most people who have contact with the courts do so in Missoula Municipal Court or in the Justice Court. And I've served as a judge, as a substitute judge for both of those courts. To the extent that it's possible, it should be a positive experience. I do agree with that. People want to be treated fairly. People want to feel like they've been heard and treated with respect, and people understand that there has to be a consequence when they break the law, but the consequence has to be just. The public also expects, and we hear this from businesses downtown quite frequently, that crime's going to be dealt with, that people will be held accountable for their actions, and that justice can be had. I believe that I'm the right choice to see that get done in Missoula. Thank you.
Moving on to Department 3, Jacob Coolidge.
Thank you again, Angela. As mentioned, I moved to Missoula in 2010 for grad school. Went to grad school for sociology and criminology. My focus was inequality in the justice system. I focused many things that have focused on local justice systems and inequalities therein, such as disproportionate representation of minority youth in our justice system, local jail conditions, the policing of shelter-resistant homeless in Missoula, including Judge Jenks's court. So I have very much been studying these issues. I'm motivated exclusively by criminal justice reform. After I graduated, I taught at the university. I taught upper level criminology courses while I was doing my research. I taught during law school, and after law school, I taught as I also ran a criminal justice reform initiative out of the law school. The reason I became a public defender is because I wanted to get more involved in the direct system rather than studying it from the sidelines. So the reason I started my job now is to get involved with the justice system. I started my practice in municipal court. And I was very surprised when I got there to see how municipal court operated, because it seems like there was a significant disconnect from what I perceived to be Missoula's community ethos and how people were dealt with in that court. See things like people being arrested on non-jailable warrants, seeing things like people spending jail in times for traffic offenses. Basically, I was shocked at how heavy-handed the court was. I'll note that I also disagree with the characterization that the court is only sentencing people to mandatory minimums. I have seen my opponent, Mr. Lerman, on the bench because I practiced in front of him. I'm familiar with him putting people in jail for no insurance tickets. I'm familiar with a case where he sentenced a young man to 6 months in jail for stealing two bottles of hard lemonade. And that sentence was later overturned by the district court because there was no reason given in the sentence. So I do disagree with this notion that the court is currently doing anything it can to avoid incarceration. Otherwise, I would not be running if I believed that to be true. I'm running because I believe that this practice and these kind of heavy-handed approaches cost us a ton of money, and they don't make the community safer because they only make it likely that people are going to be destabilized and recidivate. So while I can appreciate that people in the community want justice done, I think they want an efficient court that deals with criminality in a way that decreases the likelihood of future recidivism. And I believe that those policies are not being effectuated in Missoula Municipal Court right now. As you can tell, there's kind of a dichotomy forming here of judges who are currently on the bench defending how they do business. And there are 3 of us who say we think it should be done a different way. And that's a large reason why I'm running, is because I believe that Jennifer Streano has managerial skills that would be invaluable to the court. I believe that Eli Parker has mental health acumen and intimate knowledge of how those resources work in the community. And I believe that with my connections at the university and academic policy background, that we have 3 different strengths that can work together to make the court better for all Missoulians. That, of course, would not be a compromise of our independent autonomy, because anytime we hear a case, we would be hearing it independently, and it would be us who would be voted in by the voters, and we would still be held individually accountable. But we largely believe that this court needs change, and that's why I'm running.
And finally, Ethan Lerman.
Thank you, Angela. So my principal reason for becoming an attorney was to help people, and I've dedicated my career to doing that. I started out my career working for Montana Legal Services, representing victims of domestic violence, indigent victims of domestic violence in housing and family law matters. I moved on to the Public Defender's Office, where I worked with both Jennifer and Eli. For a number of years, I practiced in states all over, or in counties all over the state, appearing in front of different courts and different judges for a period of 5 years as a state public defender. After that, I ran my own law firm for about 10 years. I did civil, criminal, and administrative matters, providing representation all across the state of Montana. As a judge, for the past 2.5 years, I focused on increasing access to justice, rehabilitation, and treatment alternatives. I'm the first judge to incorporate municipal court in the Project Community Connect, which is a homeless project that has been instrumental in helping the people that are experiencing homelessness and get access to services in our community. I was in charge of setting up the Zoom alternatives for people appearing in municipal court over the past year and a half so that people could have greater access to appearances in court so that they didn't have to miss work to come to appear for court as a judge going forward. I'd like to see the number of hearings in municipal court cut down. I'd like to see the access to Zoom increased. I think there's economies to be had as a municipal court judge. I can see that. I've been a judge for 2.5 years. I know where the improvements lie. I think that's important going forward. I've been an attorney for 17 years. I've done nothing but represent people, and my commitment to access to justice is unquestioned. Now, as attorneys, we have a code of ethics, and I feel like it's necessary to clear up some misrepresentations that my opponents made. In fact, the sentence that he's referring to was not a 6-month sentence. It was a sentence to treatment. Once this individual got an assessment for chemical dependency, either inpatient or outpatient, then the rest of his sentence was suspended 100%, and as long as he was participating in treatment. So I take issue with the team agenda, casting aspersions on the current judges. As judges, we need to be independent. We don't have some sort of groupthink philosophy. You need to take each case as it comes, not prejudge, not predispose of cases. And it's important not to make misstatements that are harmful to the free flow of information. Frankly, if we've learned anything over the last 4.5 years, it's that just because you say something over and over and over again, it doesn't make it true, okay? We, as an attorney and as a judge, I've had a commitment to helping people, and that's why I'm running to keep my job.
Well, we thank you all for taking the time to basically give our audience your personal statements as to why you're running for the position and what you intend to do if elected. We are actually going to open up the forum now to some personal questions from members of our audience. And we're going to go ahead and begin with one. And the question is, 3 of the judges are running as a team and talking about no jail for misdemeanor offenses. So how is this appropriate when judges are supposed to be independent and each case is to be tried based on specifics? And we'll open it up.
Candidates, I'm sorry to interrupt, Angela and candidates. Before we get much further with this part of the forum, it is question and answer period for the audience. And we ask that you keep these questions civil. And if you're technically able, please associate your name with your question rather than remain anonymous so that we can credit you with the good questions that you'll most likely ask. And I believe the candidates each have a max of 2 minutes to answer each question as they come. And I'll disappear now. Thank you.
So I can go ahead and repeat the first question. 3 of the judges are running as a team and talking about no jail time for misdemeanor offenses. How is this appropriate when judges are supposed to be independent and each case is to be tried based on specifics? And we can open it up to Ms. Streano.
Thank you. So first, let me just be very clear. I don't think any of us are advocating for no jail time for all misdemeanor offenses. I think what we are saying is that we need to rethink how we use jail and only use it when it's appropriate. What we're talking about primarily is, or at least myself, is wanting to eliminate jail as a possible for minor traffic offenses, and doesn't include DUIs or things like that. So I just want to be clear about that. The other thing is we have a shared vision of how we want this court to work. This court needs to be cohesive. Although there is 3 departments, it's only one municipal court. So these 3 departments will be working together, and there needs to be cohesiveness between the departments. And there really needs to be a unified vision for how that's going to happen. And that's what we bring. We are not saying that I'm going to decide every case the same way that Eli is going to decide it or how Jake is going to decide it. We will all still look at the case individually and decide it based merely on the facts and the circumstances of each individual case. But in terms of policy, procedures, and things that will affect all of Missoulians, we three have this shared ideas of how we're going to make that happen. And so we're not losing our independence, our autonomy as judges, just because that we share those values.
All right, Ms. Streano, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and move on to Mr. Warren. And before we get your answer, Mr. Warren, I just want to go ahead and remind our audience to use the Zoom Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to ask all of your questions. And again, if you could leave your name, that would be great.
Thank you. And yeah, again, I think we've covered the topic of traffic offenses now to the point where it's probably saturated. But, you know, the fact is we don't put people in jail for traffic offenses for all practical purposes unless it's a mandatory part of the statute. If there's mandatory jail time, we're going to have to do that in most cases. And I think what I was saying earlier is even in the face of that, we've looked at ways to eliminate that. There may be a mandatory 2-day sentence for somebody with a second driving while suspended or revoked. That's why we have the work release program. And I just want to emphasize to everybody listening, we've been struggling with that problem for some time. It's something that deeply affects every existing judge. I don't think anybody wants to go home at night thinking, well, I had a good day because I put somebody in jail. It just doesn't work like that. If anything, we're on the opposite end of the spectrum. Fact remains, at the end of the day, there are mandatory sentences, and beyond that, there are people that, even in the municipal court level, in the misdemeanors, that clearly demonstrate themselves to be dangerous to others, if not themselves. We see that most frequently probably in the category of, besides DUI in the areas of traffic, but just the criminal cases, we have to deal with a lot of partner family member assault, domestic assault cases. Again, there is a mandatory jail sentence when one is convicted of partner family member assault. And that may be one instance where we don't look for a lot of substitutes or other programs, but maybe we should. And that won't be my job, is to find other programs, but when people establish another program that works and it is being adopted by other courts, that's when we can sign on to it. I think conducting some sort of social experiment in the role of judge here might have some bad consequences. I think we have to be a little bit conservative with how we want to just experiment or run things. And
Mr. Warren, thank you so much for your time. Just a reminder to all of the candidates, about 2 minutes to answer these questions. We're going to go ahead and move on to the Department 2, Eli Parker.
Thank you. And in regard to the idea that we're not going to use the jail, that's incorrect. There is basically 3 things that the court needs to do. 1 is protect the public, protect public safety. 2, protect the rights of victims. 3, protect the rights of the accused. What we're talking about is addressing issues when people are held in jail pending a charge, and that they're and also sentences. The fact of the matter is that bond is going to hit a poor person different than it is somebody that's got means, and that has big implications for the way that justice works in this town. If you are held in jail because you can't make a bond, well, you're stuck there until your case is resolved, or somebody comes up with the money to get you out. That creates a situation where people are more likely to plead guilty because the sentence that they would get on the charge is less than they would spend in jail if they were convicted. And they got to get back to work. Their families depend on them getting out and paying rent and buying groceries. So this is one of the ways that we have seen the court has been kind of a destabilizing influence on public safety at the cost of a lot of money, about $143 a night, to hold people in jail for things that, they could be addressed by getting them into programs that hold them accountable to addressing things in their life that are getting them thrown in jail. And I don't think this is a social experiment where if you look at the actual research, which Jake Coolidge is familiar with as a professor of this, these are the interventions that actually do start to reduce the number of people that are in and out of jail constantly. And that is better for our community.
Mr. Parker, thank you so much for your time. Thorin Gelst.
So 3 of the candidates have elected to run as a group. That's their prerogative. The other 3 have not. And what I'd point out is the 3 judges, including myself as a substitute, were not elected. We work for the existing municipal court judge. And it strikes me as odd that 3 public defenders would be taking the position of guilt by association. That is, because we work for Judge Jenks, that we are going to continue her, I think this is a direct quote, heavy-handed sentencing practices for nonviolent offenders. And that's malarkey. I will say this, though. Whoever is elected will get my support. If Ms. Streano or Mr. Coolidge get elected, my door will be open to them, because that's what the people in Missoula expect. That's what judges are supposed to do.
Thank you so much. Mr. Coolidge.
Thank you again, Angela. Yeah, I will echo similar things that have been stated, that we do not intend to eliminate the use of jail for all misdemeanors. I think my objective, and I believe that Eli and Jen share an objective, is to have smart penological policy. We want to be doing things that decrease the likelihood of criminal behaviors, problematic behaviors, and recidivism. In some instances, that is jail. In many instances, it is not. And I would agree that it is not particularly experimenting with people, it's innovation. We shouldn't be doing things the same way because we're scared of change. We should be embracing best practices. We should be looking at things that work in other jurisdictions. And we should be thinking about how we're going to move forward in a way that's more cost effective to the Missoulian. In terms of us running as a team, again, it bears mention that we would run independent departments and we would have those own independent decisions. We have seen in this town what it looks like when there's division amongst judges in these courts of limited jurisdiction. Our justice court had significant challenges when they had that going on 4 years ago. So it's not uncommon for judges to often collaborate about what they want to see in a court. In fact, it's quite frequent. The district court judges meet up on a regular basis to talk about what they want to do with their courts. Simply because we already have discussed things that we would like to see in Missoula Municipal Court is not a sacrifice or a compromise on our own independence, nor is it something that people need be scared of, because one of the things we want to do is collaborate with everyone, do things that the municipal court hasn't historically done, such as collaborate with the CJCC, which is a large county-based grant-funded project to decrease jail populations. So we want to continue to collaborate with everyone in the community who has vested interest in the local criminal justice system.
Mr. Coolidge, thank you so much for your time. Mr. Lerman?
Thank you. As judges, it's critical that we have an independent judiciary, not only independent from the other branches of government, but independent from one another. This groupthink or team approach is completely inappropriate for sitting judges. As a judge, I've sat in on the district court meetings that Mr. Coolidge refers to, and they don't talk about a common philosophy, okay? They don't talk about getting rid of jail sentences. They don't talk about decriminalizing laws that they can't decriminalize under Montana statute. The catchy phrase sounds great, okay? It's very catchy. I give them all a lot of credit for embarking on this endeavor. However, the reality is the reality. The reality is the legislature sets the statutes. The judges follow the law as set forth in statute and precedent. Judges need to be independent of one another and can't prejudge cases and decide some sort of philosophy or policy about how they're going to deal with this and that. And frankly, given the remarks, they're oversimplifying the issues. I've been working for 2.5 years. Judge Warren has been working for for much longer than that, to do what we can to prevent recidivism, to send people to treatment. The issue is we don't have enough resources in the community. We need access to mental health. We need access to substance abuse treatment. We need access to housing for folks. Just because someone's homeless doesn't mean they're a criminal, but it's hard to get your life straightened out if you don't have a roof over your head. So if we had more access to services in the community, that is what I would like to see going forward. And that's what I am committed to.
Mr. Lerman, thank you so much for your time. Here is another question from our audience. We are currently in a health pandemic, which consistently impacted those in our county jail. What would you do, or did you do, to minimize jail populations and also get people connected to the services they need? Ms. Streano?
Thank you. Well, I think kind of how our county commissioners and how our some of those folks responded to this pandemic with regards to the jail population and municipal court was the right thing to do. There was a referendum passed that anyone, I think, that were convicted of a non-jailable offense or a non-violent offense who were arrested, that the jail was not going to take them anymore. And that was something, though, that was not very favorable to municipal court. And I think that they did not support that referendum. I think we would continue, I know we would continue that regardless of if that referendum was still in place or not, because we have spoken to people from the jail and they have indicated to us that this is a huge problem, that when they take people in from municipal court, that they have to keep them separate due to COVID issues. That just contributes to the problem. And then we have people who need to be in jail on violent offenses and they just don't have any place for them. So I think that the one thing that I will say that we will do is communicate with the jail and hear what they need, listen to them, and really work together with this problem as we go forward. I think the other thing that is important, that prior to COVID, this court was very rigorous regarding mandatory personal appearances. And since COVID, they have now moved to allowing people to appear by Zoom and things like that. I would just want to expand that to allow people to put Zoom meetings at the POV, put Zoom at the university, so that people can appear wherever they are. Thank you.
Mr. Warren.
Yep. The subject of COVID will probably ruin my time on this as well. So I'm sorry if I run over time, but we have launched into a new world basically at municipal court just probably in the last 1.5 or 2 years. First of all, with the Zoom appearances, what we are doing that. And we constantly meet with the jail staff, just so everyone's aware of that. In fact, once a week, there's a meeting between the 3 judges and the jail staff. At that time, we receive a briefing from the jail staff as to the number of positive cases, the number of prisoners that are in isolation for COVID quarantine, and we're just kept up to date on what's going on at the jail. But I think that it does hold great promise. The Zoom change has kind of opened a new door, and we will be expanding that, I'm sure, as time goes on, because that has worked fairly well. It saves people an perhaps unnecessary trip to the court. And there's haven't heard many complaints about it except when the technology fails us, which happens once in a while. But we'll be expanding that as the time goes on. And I think COVID was a great opportunity for us to get into that. And thank you.
We're going to go on and move to Mr. Parker. Mr. Parker, are you there? I do know at some point his internet connection was a little low, so we can.
I think it's
back. Are you there?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry about that. Yeah, so this pandemic has led to a lot of innovations that have been in place both in the district court and in the municipal court. I think that one thing that I've seen lately is it's gotten worse out at the jail. I have to go out there pretty regularly to meet with people. And I think it was the second or third time back, I heard that they actually were down to one person on their transport staff. Everybody else had COVID. They have to separate people. They have to keep people in one in booking that have COVID. They're running out of room, and they're doing this to try to keep everybody healthy because it could just blow up out there. So I think that, you know, we're all doing our best with it, and we've started to use Zoom more. As I understood it, the municipal court was resistant for a while, but has started to incorporate it more. I think we'll continue to do that. And at the district court level, where I practice mostly, we do an enormous number of hearings all through Zoom. It cuts down on transportation cost. With my clients, it cuts down on having to be put into shackles for something that isn't their fault, just being ill. And so I think we're trying to adapt. And I think it's important, again, to be very, very serious about determining who it is that really needs to be in jail because of this pandemic. Because every person that's in there is a potential spreader, and that will affect staff, that will affect other inmates, and that will eventually affect the community because they're going to get out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Gelst.
So I think the judiciary and the attorneys on both sides, prosecutors and defense attorneys, I think that they've worked pretty well together during the pandemic. Everybody's recognized their responsibility, and they've done everything that they can to protect the public when they're able to. I know my time on the bench in justice court and municipal court has almost entirely been during the COVID period. We have used Zoom from the beginning. I personally would like to see that continue. I actually do agree with Ms. Streano's suggestion that having some remote sites for that would be beneficial, such as the Pavarello Center. I think that's a great idea. I can tell you that in every courtroom that I have been in, there are now barriers and precautions that are in place to protect the public, going all the way down to having a court staff member, wipe down the microphone between when attorneys go up to speak. Everyone has taken it seriously. Everyone is doing everything that they can to protect the public, and that's certainly something that I would continue in the future.
Mr. Coolidge.
Thanks again, Angela. I think it bears mention right off the bat to say that the jail has been doing a phenomenal job. They're being tasked with an almost impossible task of running a jail that's nearly at capacity, short-staffed while dealing with the pandemic. And they've done so gracefully, I must say. I think the county leaders have done a great job also working with that with creative solutions, like Jennifer mentioned, of restricting who's coming in the doors. One thing that we've heard from jail staff and all the way up to the sheriff is it does become complicated, especially when you're processing municipal court warrants, because there's an obligation to quarantine people, which forces them to consolidate folks into fewer cells to kind of accommodate that in and out. So it's been certainly a moving target for them, but I know that we've worked hard. It's my job as a defense attorney to try and make sure we can get the folks out and into treatment placements and into safe placements to try and free up the jail. One thing I can say going forward is that those jail officials have also expressed some frustrations about not necessarily having a municipal court that's responsive to the challenges of their job or the challenges of their work that they do. And I know that one thing that we would definitely do is make sure that we continue to coordinate with the jail and continue to coordinate with county government to make sure that we're using the jail in an effective manner that's helpful for them. It's worth noting that the county is the one who foots the bill for the jail, so they very much have a vested interest in kind of how all of this processes. And the presence of COVID in the jail is just an added wrinkle to the already complicated interjurisdictional equation that they are dealing with. So I could say that if we were elected, I also fully agree with Jennifer that if I'm elected, I would want to continue the use of Zoom. It sounds like we're probably all in agreement that as much as there are silver linings from a global pandemic, Zoom in the courtroom is probably one of them. It helps it so people can be more engaged with the court. And from what I've seen, it dramatically decreases failure to appear with people who otherwise have barriers to personally appearing in court. Thanks.
Mr. Lerman.
Thank you. In municipal court, we're on the front lines. We see people experiencing homelessness. We see people experiencing substance abuse issues. We see people experiencing mental health issues. We deal with that every day at an unbelievable volume. We've been open every single day during this pandemic. We've done jury trials during this pandemic, and we've changed policies across the board to accommodate people and to make people safer, including the issuance of appearance warrants. No longer are people only able to issue, our judges only able to issue arrest warrants. We can issue appearance warrants. That means that people don't go to jail if they're picked up on a district court matter or they're stopped at a traffic stop. The cop just lets them know, hey, you got to go to municipal court. You missed your court date. That's a new implementation that we've been doing for about a year and a half. The other thing, and I will take credit for this, is Zoom. We started Zoom in the municipal court at my request specifically, and that was back in March of last year, right when the pandemic hit. All we've done is expand that, and I've continued to expand it. So now litigants in my court can not only appear for an initial appearance, an omnibus hearing, a final pretrial hearing, and a jury instruction hearing. All four of those hearings, they can appear via Zoom unequivocally without reserve. Okay, so that's my policy in my court. That's what I've been doing for the last 2.5 years. I believe it's important that we reduce the stress on the jail. Absolutely. Again, I'll refer you to the numbers. Our numbers are not filling up the jail. They just simply aren't. There's 190 people in the jail, more or less, and we're taking up 10 or 12 spots, maybe. We're committed to reducing the jail population and working with the jail, and that's why we have weekly meetings with the jail staff. Thanks.
Mr. Lerman, thank you so much for your time. Another question comes to us also anonymously, but it's an interesting one. Homelessness ranks as our community's second highest concern. Is there any correlation or causation between the outcomes of municipal court and homelessness? And we'll go ahead and open it up to Ms. Streano.
Thank you. Yes, I believe there's definitely a significant correlation. At least there are things that municipal court could do to help with the situation rather than making it worse. I think that right now, again, we can use municipal court as a resource, and it doesn't have to be just a place where people come, get processed, and get kicked out the door again. We want to create some case management within the court, so that where we can connect people to resources, so that they need substance abuse treatment or mental health treatment or other issues that are causing their criminal behavior, we can start to address those issues as well within the court. The other thing with homelessness is that, jail, these short stint jail sentences, whether it's 2 days, 3 days, or 5 days, or 10 days, those have significant impacts on people. It could affect them to lose their job. And then if they lose their job, that could also then create homelessness for them if they don't have any income. So there's a huge impact of how we treat people in the municipal court to the consequences of our homeless population here in Missoula. Also, the other thing is that there are significant, right now, it's if somebody is charged with a non-jailable offense, if it's a sleeping, camping in the city limits, or an open container ticket, those don't essentially go to jail. But if they fail to appear for a municipal court case, then a warrant is issued and they are picked up, and then they do go to jail. And so we are arresting our homeless people on non-jailable offenses in this court, and that also leads to their downfall. Thank you.
Mr. Warren.
Yeah, I would challenge the contention that we're putting a lot of people in jail for, open container violations, or actually, and I'll just go back to what Judge Lerman referred to earlier. That's kind of why we've started with the appearance warrants instead of the arrest warrants. But as a judge, there's going to be a limitation. When you have an offense and nobody makes an appearance, the defendant doesn't appear in court, often a warrant will issue. That's not something we personally do or want to do, or it's just what a basic court policy. And I think it's true in courts throughout the country that you issue those warrants. And and I like the fact that we've changed one of those and we just call it an appearance warrant instead of an arrest warrant, and nobody goes to jail on it. But if the person is caught during business hours, he's brought then into court to answer the charge or to reschedule the hearing that was missed. But I don't think anything we do makes anybody homeless. Again, the mandatory sentences may take them out of a job and somehow contribute to the spiral that leads to homelessness for an individual person. But again, in most cases, they're going in when there's a mandatory sentence. So we can take the blame for that, or we can share it with the legislature that wrote the statute. The fact is there are mandatory jail sentences that anybody elected in this job is going to have to deal with. But I don't think it directly intersects with homelessness. I think it may add slightly to the problem with people that do lose their job because of the jail sentence. So that's why it's always best to avoid jail sentences. And I concur with that. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. We're going to go ahead and move on to Department 2, Mr. Parker.
Yeah, I do think that jail sentences contribute to homelessness precisely for the reason stated by Ms. Streano, that, and I think that Mr. Warren is addressing. If you can't make it to work, you lose your job. If you lose your job, you can't pay rent. You end up homeless. These are causative relationships here. Another way that I think it happens is that if you lock up people for things and they're mentally ill, and the majority of the people in jail are suffering some kind of mental illness, there is a limited number of medications that people can get when they're in jail. If somebody cheeks a med and can trade it to somebody else on their pod, it gets removed from things that can be prescribed when you're incarcerated. Well, that means that folks that have to have medication to stay stable can't get it when they're in jail. So they start to become more and more unstable while locked up, to the point that often they have to be isolated. Well, this would drive anybody nuts. And over time, eventually their sentence runs up, their case gets resolved, and they're back on the community, into the community. They've sometimes lost the few resources that they have that keep them housed, or they can't put things together because they've just spent a period of time without medications, locked up in isolation, and they're back in the community. This contributes to not only homelessness in our city, but also public safety issues. And that, not to mention the human dignity factor of it. So a court needs to be conscious of the consequences of putting somebody into jail, especially when there are mental health issues, and especially when there are poverty issues at play, because it can contribute to homelessness as well.
Mr. Gelst.
So homelessness is certainly a big factor. My personal belief, I don't think anyone should necessarily be going to jail based on an inability to pay. What I typically see is warrants going out when they fail to appear, as was mentioned, or when they just blow off the fine or the restitution amount or whatever it is altogether. In my experience, so long as the defendant contacts the court and says, "Look, hey, I'm having trouble this month," we'll find a way to work with them. That doesn't seem to be, well, that's not necessarily what happens. One of the things that I have been pretty impressed with regards to the homeless population is the level of cooperation and professionalism between the city attorney's office and defense attorneys. They have, a homeless individual won't show up for court, and the city attorney's office will say, "Judge, this person has a pretty good history of appearing." Defense will echo that. And so my experience has been they kind of have been helping with that. They've been keeping an eye on it and trying to give the court, especially in my role as a sub, when I'm not as familiar with various individuals, what's going on. I would echo what Judge Warren said too, where a warrant does go out, very often they're not arrested and held overnight. They're brought directly to court. We see them that day, and we deal with the issue of why they failed to appear. And very often they're sent back out.
Mr. Geist, thank you so much. Moving on to Department 3, Mr. Coolidge.
Thank you, Angela. I definitely agree that short-term jail sentences and short-term incarceration can contribute to or cause homelessness. I echo the same sentiment that those kind of sentences can further destabilize people, both financially, professionally, and mentally. And those are kind of the basic needs that most folks need to desist from misdemeanor criminality. So I think that doing so can make situations worse and can go as far as causing homelessness. I also recognize, and I would venture to guess probably everyone would agree, that municipal court is not capable of solving homelessness or housing affordability on its own. But I think that it should be actively working to make sure that it's improving the situation, at a minimum, not making it any worse through short-term jail sentences. And I'm not talking, again, about mandatory minimums. I'm talking about things that I've seen over the years as a public defender who has worked in that court. One thing that I would like to do is implement case management services into the court. What I have found is that most folks have services that they're already seeking in the community, and there are gaps in services that oftentimes lead to criminality or problematic behavior or folks missing court. I think we can do that at no cost to the taxpayer by utilizing my connections at the university. What I have seen at the public defender's office is, since we've had case managers there, I agree with Mr. Geist. We're able to work with folks and get them into treatment placement. We're able to come up with these kind of non-judicial solutions to problem to help people get the treatment they need that will actually address the underlying criminality. The problem that I have seen is that a lot of times those services are operating in silos and are almost partially duplicative, is that there's actually a lot of folks trying to help people get housing, get mental health care, get addiction counseling. But what I think the court needs to do is be a leader in coordinating those services so we can make sure that we're utilizing the fairly robust services that our community already has to come up with some concrete solution to these problems and get folks the help they need.
And Mr. Lerman.
Thank you, Angela. So being homeless is not a crime. It doesn't create criminality. And it's an unfortunate circumstance when people find themselves without housing. My first summer during law school, I went to work for the Washington Legal Clinic for the Homeless. And Washington, D.C., a city which, if anybody's familiar with it, has an unbelievable volume of homeless people. I've dedicated my life to helping people who are less fortunate, who are impoverished, and certainly that continues to this day on the bench. As a sitting judge, I'll tell you, we don't have enough services, period, end of story. If you think we have enough services, you haven't practiced law long enough to understand what the situation is. We have 10,000 cases a year. And almost if you take out the traffic offenses, which is about 30% of the cases, if you take that out, you're still at 7,000 cases, give or take. Almost every one of those cases involves substance abuse or mental health in conjunction, partially at times, with housing issues. That's where we need the services. We need, as a judge, I need to be able to send someone for an evaluation, to get them a therapist, to get them a CD, chemical dependency evaluation, and a counselor. Those are extremely limited in our community. Our community is growing by leaps and bounds. And I'd say a conservative estimate is we have services that were probably appropriate in 1990, okay? 30 years ago, that's where our services are today. I look forward to working with the community to expand those services. The money's there, frankly, and we just need to move forward and continue to expand those services. Thank you.
A big thank you goes out to all of the candidates. We have just a few minutes left in this City Club Missoula Forum, so I'm going to give each candidate 30 seconds to say some final thoughts, and we'll go ahead and begin with Missoula Municipal Court candidate for Department 1, Jennifer Streano.
Thanks again, Angela. So I just want to say that, what we will be bringing is change. And although the other candidates are saying that they also agree with some of our ideas, all three of them have worked in this court and they have had an opportunity to make changes and they have failed to do so. The only changes that they've recently done have been only implemented because of a pandemic. And so we have the opportunity to bring changes. I also want to say that mandatory minimum sentences there's exceptions to mandatory minimums that's also in the statute. So we just need to think creatively and do things differently. Thank you.
Mr. Warren, 30 seconds.
Yep. And contrary to that, I will just say that court is about constant ongoing change. That's what it is. That's what it's there. Whether you want it to change or not, it's going to constantly change. And I think just the way that we've dealt and gotten through the whole COVID situation the last year and a half is just an indication of that. We went from a personal appearance, basically a verbal court to being able to handle these caseloads on Zoom and everything else. I think that was a great catalyst for that change. I've done this job now for 8 years. I'd be perfectly willing to do it another 4 and appreciate the support. And whether I win or not, if I don't win, all my support and best wishes.
Mr. Warren, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and move on to Mr. Parker.
Thank you. And I'd say that I think that we have a lot of obstacles to overcome and we have certain barriers to justice in Missoula, but I don't think that the biggest barriers are time or money or even resources or expertise. It's really good ideas and the will to work with other people in this town. And that's what I will bring. That's what Jake Coolidge brings. And that's what Jennifer Streano brings. And that's why we're running together, not because we have some shared philosophy or group think.
Mr. Parker, thank you. We're going to move on to Mr. Geist.
Just say thank you, Angela. Thank you to City Club Missoula. I just end with this. Whoever is elected, regardless of which one of the candidates it is, we'll figure out a way to make it work. We'll find ways to accept each other's ideas. I'll listen to yours. You'll listen to mine. I look forward to working with whoever is elected.
Mr. Coolidge.
Thank you, everyone, for who put this on and gave us the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And I guess I will just close that I believe that this is a really critical election for kind of the future of municipal court. With Judge Jenks retiring and 3 departments, I think Missoulians have a critical role in determining what they want the future of that court to look like. And again, to echo what Eli and Jennifer have said, I believe that we have different strengths, but a shared desire to make this court better for all Missoulians. And we really are eager to work for Missoulians to try and make that happen for everyone. So thank you.
And Mr. Lerman.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you to the City Club. I just want to say that as a sitting judge, I use every ounce of my 17 years as a practicing attorney on the bench. And I believe that that's important when it comes to being a judge in the municipal court. It's a honor to do so, and I take my job very seriously, and I look forward to serving Missoula for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. And on behalf of the City Club Missoula, I in particular want to thank Angela and the candidates. I, for one, learned a great deal about my community, and I think we all have our work cut out for us. I have one of these. Hopefully everyone watching has one of these ballots. Please get yours in a timely way. It's our duty as citizens, and I, for one, plan to carry mine out. And most importantly, thank you to our audience. You're the ones who make this happen, and we wouldn't be able to do this without you. Even though I can't see you, I am grateful for your participation on these monthly Zoom forums, and hopefully we can all be back together again very soon. Again, thank you to our sponsors, especially the University of Montana, First Security Bank, and Blackfoot Communications. And next month, I hope you can all join us on November 8th. Our next forum will be on suicide awareness and prevention. So hopefully you'll be able to check our Facebook very soon and register for that. And at this point, I believe its time is up, and thanks again very much. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.